Attention on deck. You're about to take command. Welcome to the bunker.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to the bunker. I'm your host, Andy Burrows, and I am joined by one of my illustrious co-hosts this week. And don't be thrown off, he's just had a shave, looking very slim and trim over there for Memorial Day weekend. Jesse, first of all, happy Memorial Day weekend. How are you, brother?
Oh, I appreciate that so much. I'm doing great, man. It's sunny, it's hot, and look, I got to say the intro is awesome. Good job on that.
Yeah, big thanks to Steve Lim for helping us out with the intro. And breaking news: it's sunny and hot over here in the UK. I don't know what the hell has happened. I'm not sure what's going on. But Jesse, I've actually got a good weather update for once on the episode. It's sunny, it's hot, but it's probably only going to last a day. Anyway, we are joined by a great guest this week, someone that I enjoy interacting with on social media and following online. George Templeton, welcome to the bunker. How are you, sir? He froze? Well, I start, Jesse.
Uh-oh. What?
George just froze. He's gone. We've lost him.
We just had a great conversation with him. It was going perfect, and the second that we start recording, it freezes. So hopefully George can go out and maybe come back in and get that.
We have got George Templeton. It was quite ironic that he was telling us about his Wi-Fi before we hit record, and it was all going swimmingly. But anyway, Jesse, we're back to talk some Washington Commanders football this Memorial Day weekend, this bank holiday weekend over here in the UK. Jesse, I was speaking to a few people this morning. I read a great article. Our guy Zach Selby put out a great article on thecommanders.com this past week, talking about Brandon Coleman, potentially the third round pick, potentially starting at left tackle come this season. It looks like they're going to have a look at him in August. Obviously the OTAs are on right now. Obviously, we've got Cornelius Lucas and Trent Scott that potentially are going to be there, but all the rumblings and what I'm hearing and what I'm reading, if you haven't read the article by Zach Selby, go and check it out. It's a really good article. Jesse, what do you think that Coleman, potentially the third round pick, could work his way into a starting position come September?
Well, I mean, let's hope so, because it couldn't really get much worse than what we've had. I mean, if we're being honest here, we should all hope that Brandon Coleman is the future left tackle of the Washington Commanders. I mean, listen, as good and as long as Cornelius Lucas has been on the team, he is a swing tackle and nothing more. He gets figured out faster and faster each year. He's good for a game, maybe two. So we really don't want to rely on him unless this coaching staff has plans on trying to nab one of these left tackles that may be getting cut, or Donovan Smith or something like that. We should all hope that Brandon Coleman is the future left tackle. I think worst case scenario, we'll have a stalwart left guard, but we really should want him to work out at left tackle, in my opinion.
Yeah, for those watching on YouTube, don't be confused. George isn't doing some sort of Jedi mind trick. There's not two of him. We're going to hope to get George on with us in a minute. But yeah, it was a great article by Selby, Jesse. And like you say, you've got Cornelius Lucas, who is at best is a swing tackle. We need to keep him healthy. I mean, how important is it to you that come September, this situation is really addressed? Because you've got a third round pick now that potentially could come in, and come September, take the starting position. I mean, a lot of people, I read a few things online, I tweeted it out, and a lot of people were like, well, he's a third round pick. It might be like, I think Carl asked me the question when I was on with the Burgundy Zone guys a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week or so ago, that like one of the questions in, do people think that he could be a starter? Everything that I'm hearing, everything I'm reading, take OTAs with a pinch of salt. Until we have that practice, is against the Dolphins right now, Jesse. The Dolphins are coming into town for a joint practice. Do you think that will tell the coaches more than we're kind of seeing now? Because what we're seeing now is great, and I love everyone getting excited, and it's OTAs, and like you said a couple of weeks ago, you can't, you're playing against fresh air right now. But I think that the telling moment will be like when training camp really starts, and when the Dolphins come into town, and when preseason hits us. I think Coleman, I said this to Carl and the guys in the Burgundies, I think he's got a genuine chance. I'm more maybe leaning to week 4 and 5, maybe. But if he is going to be a genuine starter, I think he could do a job there, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're never going to know till you get the pads on and start hitting someone. You really can't really tell anything when you're in t-shirts and shorts. Let's be real. Dan Quinn said it himself. This is basically a passing camp that's going on right now. That doesn't help anybody. Any of the team that's in the trenches. So I think it's a 50-50 on Brandon Coleman, but I liked what I've seen. I've been watching his college tape and he did very well. He wasn't moved over to guard because he couldn't hang at left tackle. They just needed him over there because they didn't have enough bodies. But he did primarily play left tackle at TCU. And another thing is he has extremely huge reach. Chris Cooley did a breakdown of him. Actually, I listened to the podcast yesterday, and he has some good things to say. He said he was a bit of a project, and I mean, obviously, 3rd round pick. I don't care what round that you're out of. Okay, you could be a 7th round pick.
Yeah, people make too much. They make too much of a big deal of that, don't they, Jesse? A lot of people. Oh, well, he's a. Look at Cam Kell for a prime example. Sure. People are like, oh, he's drafted in the 3rd round or 4th. If you're a good football player, you're a good football player. If you prove that in OTAs and then in training camp and preseason, I don't care what round you've been drafted in. If Dan Quinn goes, you can start. I don't care if you've been in the 1st round, the 5th round. I don't care what round you got drafted in. If you're a good football player, you're a good football player.
Absolutely.
Yeah. George, we have you at last. You weren't playing Jedi mind tricks with us. I saw 2 of you at one stage.
I was going to the phone as a backup because unfortunately now I guess this internet issue's going to follow me around all day, which is great. But no, here's the thing about Brandon Coleman. You look at what we had at left tackle last year. If he's at least as good as that, I want him in there because you're developing him. I'm looking at everybody that we've drafted this year as the building blocks to beginning to build the roster that we want to have in 3 to 5 years' time when we expect to contend regularly. So a guy like Brandon Coleman, yeah, he's probably going to have a couple of tough moments, but he's going to have to seriously be bad not to be a better option than what we had at left tackle last year. So sure. I'm all good with Brandon Coleman playing and starting week 1 as long as he's showing some development and it's not like a total train wreck over there at left tackle when we get to training camp and preseason.
George, was it telling that Adam Peters said, obviously, when we drafted him, he said we didn't just draft him for one position. They've seen him playing maybe anywhere along that line. I mean, that's telling. I mean, Ron Rivera, and if you listen to Goldie's podcast, they always mention the word position flex. I know Jesse hates it, but it used to be the buzzword going around Washington. But Adam Peters has come out and said, look, when we drafted Brandon, we had various roles for him in mind, and left tackle was one of them.
No, and that's fine, but I got to say, one of the big frustrations of not just this past regime, but previous regimes was drafting tackles that ended up not playing at tackle. And yes, I know it worked out with Sam Cosmi, but honest to God, I want us going forward, if we're drafting a tackle, they better be a tackle. If we're drafting a guard, they better be a guard. The only time I really like that position and flexibility is with centers, where you can kick them over to guard sometimes. Yeah. But in general, Brandon Coleman, I want him to get every chance at tackle before we even think about kicking him inside or whatever, because that's been such a big hole since Trent was traded. And you got to try. And the thing, and remember this too, I could see Adam Peters' point in this regard. Maybe down the line, Brandon Coleman is a depth piece and he's a guy who's backing up both tackle spots. So he can play left or right tackle depending, and we draft somebody that's better next year or 2 years down the line, and they're the starter. So I can see it from that angle. But right now, unless it's a total train wreck at left tackle, I want him in there. I want him playing. I want him getting better. Because especially when it comes to offensive linemen, the round really doesn't matter. You talk about you look at the history of the great linemen in this not just in this franchise, but all over. I think Larry Allen, one of the greatest tackles of all time for the Cowboys, I think he was drafted in round 5. and he was drafted out of a school hardly anybody would have ever heard of, Sonoma State. So you can find Hall of Fame offensive linemen in quite literally any place in the NFL draft. So
even undrafted players have made it to the Hall of Fame. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter which round you're drafted. If you can play, you can play. And kind of like what George was saying, I think worst case scenario, I think we got a good guard. But it would work out and benefit the team because Lucas is getting older. You know, another worst case scenario, he could be a swing tackle. I like the point that George made. We knew that they weren't going to be able to fix every hole in one off season, or whether for a free agency, because we had so many holes. I mean, we got a lot of stop gaps, 1 year contracts just to be able to field a team basically. So this is a process. We got to be patient. They did some work on the offensive line this offseason. They brought in Badias. They brought in Allegretti. I think the center and left guard was more of an issue than the outsides, to be honest with you. Wiley, we understand why Wiley's still here. There's a huge contract, and having to fix both the tackle spots in 1 year, I think is a little bit, asking a little bit too much in 1 year, but he'll be gone next year. So fans need to calm down about that. And like I said, they just couldn't fix everything in 1 year. So we got to have a little patience in this matter.
Boys, do you think that the times now we need to, I think especially with Adam Peters here, Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury, et cetera, do you think putting square pegs in round holes is a thing of the past in Washington? Like Jesse said earlier, and George, you mentioned, we're so sick and tired of seeing people not play where they're meant to be, and it would be really bad at it, or we're looking around on a Sunday going, we're bringing in a right tackle that Cornelius Lucas, like Jesse put out at the start of the episode, best position swing tackle, and he's not really very good at that. George, for you, is it time now the Washington Commanders, you look around the league, and don't get me wrong, I get certain injuries might dictate certain things that you have to do, but it seems to be now this new regime under Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, the days of square pegs and round holes seem to be gone.
I really hope so. And I expect it too, because that was not, I don't think you saw a lot of that in Atlanta when Dan Quinn was a coach there. It was only in times, and they had these times, admittedly, on the defensive side of the ball, of just ludicrous injury issues where they would try stuff like that. I think Dan Quinn is a guy that has always believed in putting players in the best position to succeed, which is playing them and trying to use their talents the way it is instead of trying to mold them to your system. So I'll be honest, one of the things that you can be that I feel like the reason we can be very confident about Dan Quinn is the fact that he's not going to be trying to get players to fit his system. He's going to put them in the best position, and Joe Witt Jr. will put them in the best position to succeed and kind of you mold the system around them. And I think Kliff Kingsbury's kind of the same way too. There's a lot of talk about the air raid and how he coached in Arizona, but they got players that fit that system and made sense playing that way. So it wasn't a case of, well, I'm going to take this quarterback who's a drop back quarterback and try to make an air raid quarterback. No, that's not what happened. They got Kyler Murray, and he fit the system to fit his unique talents. And even though it didn't work out great, it absolutely helped Kyler Murray as a player. So I'm not worried about that issue at all. I think that is a thing of the past with Washington now.
Let's hope so. Jesse, what does Kliff Kingsbury need to do this season to separate us from previous regimes? What does this new style Kliff Kingsbury offense look like, in your opinion?
Well, kind of like what George was just saying, is like you fit your scheme around the players that you have, and a lot of people are talking about this air raid system, and it's not even really an air raid system anymore. He's taking bits and pieces and maybe some schematics of it. But kind of like he did with Kyler Murray, that really even wasn't a true air raid system. You're going to put putting players in the best position to succeed is the number one game, whether it's on offense or defense. his number one mission is to develop Jaden Daniels, and we have a hell of a supporting staff for him to do that as well. Kliff has been around a lot of quarterbacks that are in the NFL, even in his college years, and he's good with that. What I like about Kliff Kingsbury is now he only has to focus on the offense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard from even Jaden himself, him sitting down, like, okay, you like this concept, you like that concept. All right, let's see how we can work this into the offense that we want to run. It's not going to be kind of a his way or a highway type thing. And we've heard that from Kliff's former players in Arizona. So I'm excited to see what Kliff can do, because for all accounts, he's an offensive genius. I'm not sure if he's on that McVay level yet, but he's pretty damn good. And now that him just focusing on the offense, he doesn't have to worry about anything else but the offense. I think is just good for Jaden Daniels and his development.
Yeah, George, does it speak to where football might be going now as well, that someone like a Kliff Kingsbury will say to a rookie in Jaden Daniels, hey, look, what do you like here? It's all right giving a rookie a playbook and just throwing it at him and going, learn that. Whatever play I call, we're running. That's kind of old school football mentality of the 80s and maybe the early 90s. Do you think that someone like a Kliff Kingsbury will look at the rookie and obviously evaluated untold amounts of hours of film on him, watched his college game, they'll watch him in OTAs, a little bit in preseason? Does it speak to the modern day coach that maybe has been missing in Washington? Jesse mentioned McVay there, that he's going to Jaden and going, hey, look, what do you like how can you influence me and I can help you? That sort of speaks to the modern day coaching era that we maybe have been missing under like Scott Turner, etc.
Oh, no, there's no question. I mean, it used to be you wouldn't have gotten that as a quarterback until you were long established as not just a starter, but a good starter in the league. Like, your Peyton Mannings, your Trent Greens, and there's so many other quarterbacks, your Favres, your Rodgerses. Now, I think you have to do it this way, I think, because you also don't have the kind of time to develop a quarterback and say, learn this and do it this way. You don't have that kind of time. Coaches are getting blown out the door in 2 years, 3 years. A head coach these days in the NFL is lucky if they get 4. And if they get 4, sure, they've probably had some success right away that's bought them that time. So yeah. I think it's absolutely right that we're in that kind of an era. And look, these players in college are getting more and more varied concepts, more and more complicated offenses in a lot of ways. Look, Jaden Daniels played for Brian Kelly last year at Louisiana State. And whatever you think of Brian Kelly as a coach or a person, he throws a lot at the quarterback, but at the same time, he'll mess around with his offense a little bit to kind of fit what the quarterback wants to do. So I guarantee you, Jaden Daniels has had that question from Brian Kelly about, hey, what kind of stuff do you want to run? And look, you look at the result. I mean, if it wasn't for Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels would have had the greatest season by an LSU quarterback in the history of that school. And that's not nothing. So I think we've obviously been behind the times a lot here in Washington with a lot of the things we've done, especially with the previous regime. So yeah, this is Washington catching up to everybody else, because McVay does the same thing. I'm sure Ben Johnson does the same thing in Detroit. Pick your really good offensive coordinators that are out there. There are plenty of them. They've always done that. And now we're finally doing it, which is nice.
George, you mentioned hot seats there. Jesse, before we started recording, you were telling me about an article that has been flying around and a podcast that has been doing the rounds over there in the good old United States of America. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jesse and George. Someone has been on a podcast. I don't know why you'd start a podcast. They're overrated. I don't know why. Dan Quinn, Jesse, I believe, according to this certain podcast, I'll let you tell the story and fill in our listeners. Dan Quinn already on the hot seat in Washington. Pray tell, my friend, who has been saying such stupid tomfoolery.
Yeah, listen, Mina Kimes, and she gets a lot of grief from people, on social media. Probably because she's a woman, which is absolutely ridiculous. She's very smart. She sits and watches film all day, every day. She knows her stuff. I have a lot of respect for her. But she has a show, the Mini Con show with Lenny, which is her dog, but she always has guests on. I forget the guests, but she was doing top 10 coaches and then top coaches on the hot seat. And the NFC East came up. And they said that all the coaches on the in the NFC are on the hot seat, which I would agree in principle, except for one coach, and that's Dan Quinn. But they were talking like he could be one and done. I'm going to throw this question to you guys. What in her right? What was she thinking when what gives you any clue that he would be on a hot seat year one? We have a new ownership. This is their second year. Really, they couldn't really do anything the first year, but they went through this process in the coaching search. And I know me and George have a little bit of disagree on who was favorites too. I don't believe there's an actual favorite, a favorite coach, but I think they came to a consensus. I think Dan Quinn's going to be here for the long term as far as a whole contract. I think the process is process driven. This ownership group has proven to be. I mean, even with the 76ers, Josh Harris's other team, he developed the process. So what in the right mind would make her think that this is a one and done type of year, even if we have, a 2-15, 3-16 type of season?
Don't listen to Pro Football Talk with your 2-15 nonsense.
I'm just throwing it out there. It's you go on social media right now, you'll see the video clip of them talking about it, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I think it's just an easy. I'd be interested, George, to get your views as well. I think it's just an easy thing to do to target a Washington Commanders coach, and if by some craziness we come out and we lose, I don't know, 6 out of the first 8 games, the fire will be lit. Don't get me wrong, we'll all probably jump on social media at some stage and angrily tweet. We all do it, but I think under Josh Harris, Adam Peters, et cetera, I think there is going to be a process. There's going to be no knee-jerk reaction. There's going to be, look, we believe in what we've got in the building. What you can't do as an organization is at the first sign of any kind of trouble, it's just throw it all out the window. You can't keep doing that as any organization, whether that's the NFL, whether that's the Premier League over here. I've seen it in sports before. It's an immediate reaction to losing games of football, and in the NFL, look, it's not for long. I get that. That's players, that's coaches, etc. But what you can't do now as a Washington organization is panic. We say this all the time on this podcast, when we're chatting on our social medias, when we're chatting in WhatsApp groups. Patience isn't a word that Commanders fans like. This is probably the first time in a long time I don't mind having a bit of patience. I'm going to be angry on Sundays when we're not playing well. I'm going to be angry. That's just, do you know what that's called? That's called being a football fan. That's called sitting on your couch, watching a game of football. Heat
of the moment.
Heat of the moment. I mean, Jesse, you're the best at it on a Sunday. He's storming out the group. He wants everyone fired. We're burning FedEx down. I don't know what's going on in Jesse's house on a Sunday. But George, for people to say that Dan Quinn is already on the hot seat, I think it's just easy to say because it's Washington. I mean, geez, look at the Cowboys. They're meant to be America's team. Haven't done anything in how long? Yes, they make playoffs and then they get beat in the first round. I mean, is it just because it's Washington, George? I know you've got some strong views on this.
I do, and I think it's assuming that I wonder if she still thinks Dan Snyder's the owner. Because honestly, if Dan Snyder were still the owner, you could make a statement like that, and you could halfway believe it because of how crazy things were under him. But this is the trust the process era, and I know that's going to be overused for a lot of people, but it really is. We are transitioning as a football team. Mm-hmm. We are turning over the roster completely unless Josh Harris has completely lost his mind, he's not expecting us to win this year or next year, maybe even the year after. I mean, he said it himself. What was it? He was at some conference and they were talking to him and he's like, yeah, you can have a shortcut to 8-8, but if you want to be a good team long-term, you can't do a shortcut. It takes time. And for me, Dan Quinn is the same person as Brett Brown was with the Philadelphia 76ers. When Josh Harris said, we're going to tear this down and start over completely, and he hired this a numbers guy as his GM, and they traded everybody away, anybody that they got good, They traded as soon as they could to get more picks. And Brett Brown was there through 3 seasons where they didn't win 20 games out of 82 in the NBA. And in his 4th season, they won 28. And what was he doing? He was teaching, but he was keeping that team together, keeping them playing hard every night. So 4 years of pretty miserable basketball. 19 wins, 18 wins, 10 wins, 28 wins out of 82. Then all of a sudden, 5th year he's there, they win 52 games. They win 51 the next year. They make the 2nd round of the playoffs both years. And then they go out in the bubble and they get beaten the 1st round. They lose. They fire him. They go for a more named coach to try to win a title. I kind of feel like that's where we are with Brett Brown. I think, with Dan Quinn. He's going to be a guy who's teaching. He's going to be a guy who's developing talent. He's going to be a guy that's keeping the team motivated because, again, this roster is going to be completely turned over. If you view 2023 as I do, which is the last year of the Snyder era, because essentially it was, Harris and those people didn't get the team until almost training camp. So essentially 2023 is the last year of the Snyder era. We're going to look back at that. There might be, not counting the 2023 draft picks, and there might not be many of them either. You might be able to count on one hand how many of those players will still be on this roster at the end of 2026 and the start of 2027. So this whole roster is going to be turned over. And that's going to mean there's going to be struggles. That means there's probably going to be seasons where we don't start well, but you've got the right kind of coach to keep a team together, to develop talent, to teach and to show and that kind of thing. And so look, the idea that he would be on the hot seat in 1 year, it would totally go against the type that this ownership group has shown. It would totally go against what Adam Peters has shown as an executive. I mean, yes, the 49ers did that. They fired 2 coaches in a row after 1 year, but they were in a really bad place. And at that point, Lynch and those guys hadn't come in yet. They bring Kyle Shanahan in. You see, takes them a few years, and now look at them. They're contenders every year and that kind of stability. So I'm not worried at all about Dan Quinn's job. I wouldn't even think about evaluating him until at least 3 years in. And like I say, I think we're going to be a good team in 3 or 4 years. I want to see Dan Quinn in the playoffs before I'm thinking about throwing him out for a coach that I think is going to win the Super Bowl, if that's what we think we need to get there. So this is, people got to understand this. If we don't win 10 games this year, it's not only all right, it's probably better. If we don't win 10 games next year, same thing.
You hear that,
Look
Andy?
at what the Lions did with Brad Holmes, and they almost did it exclusively through the draft and a few canny signings in free agency, but not many. They were 2 or 3 wins that first year. They were 2-7 or 2-8 in the middle of the next year, and then got hot at the end and almost made the playoffs. And then you saw what they did last year. I can't believe I'm saying the Lions are the model, but the Lions are the model.
Sure. You know, it's funny, George, I've been saying exactly what you said. Let's not expect to Andy for the past couple of weeks on this podcast.
Just looking for my glass of Kool-Aid. I don't know where I'll put it.
Yeah, because they have been drinking the Kool-Aid. And listen, I want to ask you guys this. I mean, we got the Houston Texans. Now that the Houston Texans did what they did with their rookie quarterback in D'Amico Ryans, I mean, that's the exception. That's not the norm. Okay, just because they did that does not mean that we can turn this around with a rookie quarterback. Even though I got all the faith in the world in this rookie quarterback, it was kind of it was a perfect storm for that team for that to happen. At that particular time, I like CJ Stroud as a quarterback. He's a phenomenal quarterback. I think he's going to be great in this league for years to come. I think Jane Daniels is going to be great in this league for years to come. But they already had some pieces in place. They had a nucleus in place for that to take off. And D'Amico Ryans came in here and really galvanized that team. We can't expect that to be normal, okay? We have to just chill out. We went through a way too early season predictions last week or the week before. And, of course, my Kool-Aid drinking buddy over here, Andy Burrows, has us winning, what was it, 13 games or something like that?
No, well, I think Scouse had us winning 10 games, and you might have had us winning 10 games by the end of the episode.
No, I did not. I said,
go back and watch
see
it.
A path I see a path to 9-8, but I'm still at that 7-8 win type of season. And I think if we get to win 7 games, I think we need to basically all but throw a parade, because that will show us that, yes, we have a quarterback, which is the number one thing that we've been missing for 30 plus years. And two, Dan Quinn has, and Adam Peters has this franchise going in the right direction. I expect to see a jump in 2025. That's where I really think this team, because next year, we have a lot of money still left in cap space. Next year, we're going to have even more money. I really think they did these 1-year deals to put the team again, to put a team that could be halfway competitive this year, and two, to get have 2 years of draft picks and 2 years of free agency. You see, all we did was a couple 3-year deals. Next year, I think, is that year to make that next step, to go make sure you get your franchise left and right tackle, and to get the small pieces. Who knows what's going to happen with John Allen, but we might need to, we're going to need to do some more work on the defensive line, especially at probably edge rusher. Also the linebacker spot and corner. I think outside of offensive line, that's where this team needs help the most. Also probably going to need a receiver here soon too. It's going to take time, guys. It's going to take some time to get all this done.
You're talking parades. You're talking parades. Jesus, if we make the playoffs, give me an open top bus, a ticket to the White House, ticker tape. We're playing in the middle of January. Just get me to the White House to meet the president. That's all I want. But interesting times ahead. Boys, one other little bit of news coming out of Washington this week, George. David Blackburn appointed new director of player personnel. This just speaks to me of just the franchise, the organization, just getting adults in the room, right?
Oh, and I would also point out, look at some of the people who've been leaving, who've been longtime employees. And my hope is they figured out who were the people that in previous times were leaking stuff to the media, especially negative stuff, that they're figuring out the people who are not going to be all rowing in the same direction. This is the first time in almost living memory. I mean, certainly back to when I was a kid, that it feels like everybody, ownership, front office, coaching staff, is on the same page, is rowing in the same direction, because we haven't had that. We've had the palace intrigue. We've had players taking shots at players, coaches taking shots at players anonymously through their media lapdogs, and you're not seeing that now. And yes, adults in the room, no question, but just we're going to have a normal administration. We've had 25 years of maladministration. And now we're actually going to have normal administration with a normal situation in front office where everybody's going to be working collaboratively together, instead of, well, this guy wanted this guy in the draft and I didn't want him, so I'm going to put something out about him to make this guy I don't like look bad. That kind of thing. We're not going to have that. We're going to have actually a normal freaking organization. And I said it on somebody else's video when they were talking about that. It's like, what's normal for everybody else is a breath of fresh air for us, which is kind of sad, but that's the situation we're in. And I think Adam Peters has had a really strong off season. He's hit the ground running here. He's got an idea exactly of where to go, and a vision and a plan and a foundation, which is why unless this team is really, really bad, I feel very good about what's going forward, because this is the first time we've had a real unified, thoughtful plan in a long time.
Yeah, it's not even just on the football field, but other aspects of the franchise. I mean, with Dan Snyder on the helm, there will be no talks for RFK. And now that new poll that the Washington Post put out, they actually went out and polled people that live in DC themselves about, do you want the Commanders back in Washington DC? And in years prior, it was like 14% of people that lived in the RFK area said no. Now it's up to 51% of people. So just Harrison Company buying this team and going through that process and getting Adam Peters getting Dan Quinn and having a plan. Now, look, all these people that they're bringing in, no one knows much about them, but what we do know is they would not have came here if Dan Snyder was still the owner.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, just finishing off, you boys have mentioned basketball a few times this episode. Just saying, Jesse, my Boston Celtics are 2-0.
I don't even talk about it.
I'm just saying. Good
Take
afternoon.
your
Can I give
elsewhere.
a shout out to Tim Meek as well? How you doing, bro? My Celtics are kicking, getting my.
It's not over yet, Andy.
Sweeping. I'm sweeping. No, it's not over yet. We play again. 1:30 in the morning for me. If you're watching this today, the game 3 is 1:30 in the morning. Let's just get to one last thing before we get to fan submissions. Before we get out of here, big talk this week. I know Scotty G tweeted it to us. Pro Football Talk tweeted it out. It was on NFL Network. Mentioned it when they put the schedule out. George, Jesse, I don't think this is ever going to happen. It might do. I could be wrong. The draft coming overseas to London. George, what did you make of that when you heard it? It's been tweeted out loads. They talked. Interesting discussion on NFL Network. They were kind of split. I don't know how. I love the international games and the fact that it comes over here. I don't go to many anymore. I'm not gonna lie. I want to see the Commanders come back. I've kind of been to all the games. George, what did you make of just briefly? What did you make? Could we potentially see the draft leaving the United States? I don't think so. I think I'm being invaded.
I don't think so either, but it is an interesting idea. My big issue with it is the problem with having it at the time they have it. That is when the furnace is the hottest for the Premier League season, because you're coming to the end of the Premier League season in late April. There's about 2 or 3 matches to go, maybe 4, depending on if you have teams that have games that they've got to make up. And I just don't know about having a draft and that's the other thing. You couldn't have a Thursday night draft. That's out. You couldn't have that. You'd have to go back to the setup that admittedly I miss. I miss the old Saturday at noon, roll out of bed after a long night, doing whatever at college. Or in my case with my old roommate, God rest his soul, we'd troop on down to the sports bar at noon, and the sun deck would be open for the first time all year, and the weather in Richmond would be beautiful, and we'd sit out there for 3 or 4 hours drinking beer, eating food, and watching the draft. I think you'd have to go back to Saturday, Sunday for just the London thing. I would start it at 10 a.m. if you're going to do that. That's 3 o'clock UK time. And then, and I'd have round 1 and 2, and then the rest of them on Sunday. And I think it could be a great event. It's just the timing of it is the problem, because of the fact that it comes at when the football season in England is at its absolute hottest. It's the end of the lower leagues. It's the end of the Premier League season. And I just don't know if the NFL can really penetrate that and get the kind of crowds and get the kind of interest they wanted. So for that reason, I would say probably not. Also because you can't do Thursday night prime time over there. You can't have a draft at 1 a.m. unless you're going to have it in like some ballroom in London and have the two sickos and diehards Andy show up.
Maybe a Friday night. Like it would have to start like 5 p.m. our time. But yeah, I don't see. Like I said, I said it before. I'll say it again, Andy. You can have the Jaguars, okay? You can't.
We don't want them.
Draft.
I don't want them. Stop trying to send me the Jaguars. I don't want them.
You can't have the NFL draft. That's ours. I think it's more likely the draft comes here to Washington. First foremost,
it's in Pittsburgh next year, and I read something online Wednesday.
They're talking about it.
They're talking the year after to be DC. If that's the case, I'll tell you now.
I'm there.
I'm there.
And that's a hop, skip, and a jump away
from
a
hotel. Boys, let's just end the episode with a few fan questions. I tweeted out the other day, and I think Freddie, hot take Freddie. No, he says talk about the name. No. Go away, Freddie. Richard Cameron, Jesse says, if the Commanders held a player Royal Rumble in a training camp, which player would be the last man standing?
That's a good question right there. I saw that when Richard.
I got one obvious answer for that.
I think everybody would be so intimidated, and they are right now by Bobby Wagner. But he's getting a little bit old.
Jonathan Allen.
So I don't know. Jamin Davis is a beast, man. He might not show it on the field, but he is ripped, cut, and like I've seen him up close and personal, and that dude is huge. I'd be scared to get trapped in the alleyway with him. So I'm going to say Jamin Davis.
George, who are you going for? I'm going for Jonathan Allen.
This is obvious. It's Deron Payne.
Okay.
Deron Payne, when he and Jonathan Allen
show.
had that fight on Sunday night in Dallas when they got destroyed.
Oh, prime time, yeah.
Deron Payne looked like he was going to murder Jonathan Allen right there. So Deron Payne would go in there, and it'd be like when Omos or Nia Jax get in and they throw about 7 people over in 20 seconds. That's what he would do. It would probably take 5 or 6 of them to get him out of there. I'm still not sure they would do it. Deron Payne is clearly the favorite.
Look, I agree. Like Deron Payne's probably the strongest out of everybody. I just
think
the
craziest.
Yes, I think Jamin Davis is the quickest though, as well as being very strong. But another guy,
Rey Mysterio,
that is, he's a newcomer to the team. Nick Allegretti is a big ugly man, so I think he might have a shot.
Yeah, but so is Keith Gray, but I'm not putting him in the Rumble. True. He's a big ugly dude. Well, just ugly dude.
That's true. But have you seen Allegretti? He's huge. He's a monster. So he might have a fighting chance as well too.
Okay. Ali Hunt would like to know, George. It's quite interesting actually. Maybe we could have talked about this more. We're getting maybe more into this later date. I'd like to hear the thoughts on Bobby Wagner telling Jeremy Reeves to grow up during the press conference. Saw that tweeted out. He says, is it quite interesting now that we've the professionalism, easy for me to say, that has landed in Washington? Interesting little tidbit there, Bobby Wagner showing why he's a veteran of the NFL, right, George?
And look, and Bobby Wagner can say that because Bobby Wagner's led a defense that's went to 2 Super Bowls in a row. And you can't look at that man's record and say anything to him about this, that, or the other. Bobby Wagner, I mean, that's one thing. I love that he came here, and that's clearly a Dan Quinn thing. If the Dan Quinn was not our coach, he's not here. Mm-hmm. And what he's going to be is an extension of Dan Quinn on the field. Yeah. He's going to be basically Dan Quinn is going to speak, and Bobby Wagner, it's going to come out of Bobby Wagner's mouth in a lot of ways. And I think that's great. Again, and I don't know if Bobby Wagner has thoughts about coaching when his career is done, but I think he'd be ready-made to be a coach. Oh, and I think you're going to see that. I think he's going to be a coach on the field this year. And look,
that's why Ryan Kerrigan's still here. That's why Kerrigan's still around. So, transition from being a great player to being a voice as a coach, and people like Bobby Wagner and, Kerrigan, George, I think you're right there. The respect factor. Keep these kind of people involved in the game of football. Too many times I've seen people get out of this building because of, we're not going to go into it, but what's gone on. Now you get the fact that Bobby Wagner is even in a Commander's uniform still baffles the shit out of me, because I'm like, I think it's great how he's suiting up for the Commanders. And George, you are spot on, because Dan Quinn's here. Bobby Wagner is a Washington Commander.
Bobby Wagner also has that, he has that authority. I mean, Revo, he's all pro too. And even though I think I think it was kind of half a joking type of thing too that was going on, because they kind of laugh about it. But I mean, that's the aura that Bobby Wagner has. He don't care that you're an all pro. Hey, stop being a kid. Stop being childish. And that's what this team, I think, has needed for a long time. And Jonathan Allen, we've talked about him before. We kind of got tired of hearing Jonathan Allen, talk after games, because he talked the talk and not walk the walk. But you got a guy in here now in Bobby Wagner that has talked the talk, that has walked the walk over and over and over again.
Jonathan Allen's a happy man right now, though. I don't know if you read I read this. Zach Selby, again, great work. I read his article saying Jonathan Allen said he loves the vision of the team. He's loving what the coaching staff are bringing. All right, it's OTAs and it's May, so you should love what's going on right now. I'd be surprised if you didn't enjoy what you're tackling fresh air right now. But 2 more questions before we get out of here. Your Lex Luthor, your nemesis, Scotty G, Jesse. If you were on the team, what jersey number would you wear? For me, number 7. I've always wore it. Playing soccer my whole life, football, number 7, easy peasy.
Yeah, it would have to be my number in all sports that I play was 6. So
okay, George.
Wasn't much of an athlete, so never really had to wear a number. So it'd probably be 23, since I was born on the 23rd of June. 23,
David Beckham's number at Real Madrid. Final one coming in from Canada, Mike. Good old, God bless him. How important do you think coming up with incentive ways for both the kickoff and receiving kickoff might be within the new rules. Jesse, obviously the rules have kind of slightly changed this coming season. Do you think it's going to have any impact on the game?
Yeah, more than
Are we going to see every time the kick? I don't know why they bother with the kickoff of a game. It just when's the last time it didn't get booted out of the end zone?
Yeah, it's before the rule changes, I think it was like 97% of kickoffs or 93 or something like that resulted in the touchback. Now that it's an actual play now. I mean, they're trying different things and kind of going off of what George said earlier on the podcast about Dan Quinn and what he's doing with the players. He's trying to find if there's anything special about it. That's why they had Forbes back there returning some of these kicks, because he had multiple interceptions for touchdowns. That's what he did very, very well at Mississippi State. It was returning interceptions, kind of the same thing as returning a kick. You're taking the ball and going the other way. But this is more of kind of like you're going to have to game plan for this play a little bit now. So I think this year is going to be very interesting to see what teams actually do and how they scheme this particular play.
Yeah. Boys, our hour is up. George, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you join us on the bunker. Thanks for the support that you give us.
I'm glad to do it, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, just tell our listeners, George, if they don't already follow you on social media, where can they catch you, brother? What are you up to these days?
All right. You can follow me on Twitter at TempTheRat, TempTherat. And my main podcast, little side hustle deal, is something called Rams Rewind, which follows mainly VCU men's college basketball. And this summer, we're not too far away from doing a series on new players that are coming to the program. And we've actually had some Englishmen play in our program.
Wow.
We get everywhere, George.
We just had one transfer, sadly, who was a really good player, who came out of the city of London, as a matter of fact.
Great.
And played a year over here in Maine and then went to our school. But we've had English players at our school in class. We're a very international school, so we've had a lot of international players. But that's what I do. I'm mainly a college basketball podcaster, in addition to being this longtime Redskins Commanders, the Washington football team fan that I've been. Very
George,
long time.
Thanks so much for coming on. I know you're a big football fan. I called it football, Jesse. Over here, we call it football. Euros are coming. The European Championship. The European Championships obviously start in 2.5 weeks. England got a great chance. You're going to see me tweeting about that. We're doing our Euro shows over at Talk of the Town podcast. So, George, enjoy the Euros. Boys, Jesse, enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day weekend. I hope you have a great weekend. Like us, we are off on Monday as well. I'm hoping the sunshine is going to last. Looks like it's going to. But you can check us out on YouTube. Just typing @ Commander Bunker. Let's get them subscriptions up. I am actually enjoying the YouTube stuff that Jesse and Scouse have finally got me to do. Big shout out again to Steve Lim for doing the intro for the show. @ Commander Bunker on good old Twitter. But we'll be back again next week to do all of this. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of The Bunker. I've been your host, Andy Burrows, with Jesse Martin, George Templeton. Till next time, everybody, bunker down and stay safe.